welcome. This is Instant Photography Conference. My name is Erin Delsigne, and I'm also known as film collage artist. I'm an artist and photographer from Los Angeles, located in Hollywood. One of my specialties is instant film. One of my special. I'm sorry. Okay. One of my specialties is instant film photography and collaging. I specialize in more of a surreal portrait and psychedelic landscape approach. I like to utilize both Polaroid and Instax. The image on the right here is a combination of all Instax style photos. This particular collage took me over a year to complete, and they have 4 different weather and 8 different photo sessions. Here's just an example of one of my collages. I'm currently working on a series of sky collages that are clouds. So I like to work with instant film for multiple reasons that I'll discuss later in the conference. I like to focus on surreal with instant film in particular because everything happens in real life in an instant, in a moment, but you can create realness, but also an image that is surreal and not real based on how you assemble them. Today we're going to discuss like a brief history of instant film. I feel like it's a very important reason why we're going to keep instant film alive, but also the impact on experimental photography, why I choose instant film, as well as why I feel everyone should choose to shoot with instant film, and how vintage instant photography will continue to inspire and evolve into the future. So we'll start with the history of instant film. Inventor Edwin Land was on vacation with his 3-year-old daughter who wanted a photo of herself to see it instantly. This is what actually inspired him to invent the camera as well as the film. The camera was invented a year before instant film was actually invented. So I always say 1948 is when, just because that's when the actual film was able to shoot. But the first camera that was the Polaroid model 95, as you can see in the photo. And the phenomenon of instant film was about to hit the world in a way that Polaroid was not expecting. They actually sold out all of their cameras and the film in the first day, which was very rare for that time, because people were interested in that instant gratification and not having to wait for that image. In essence, the instant photography packs all of the operation of a dark room inside of the film itself, which is the biggest reason it's so successful for experimental photography, because those processes allow, because the film must catch the light from the lens, that's where you can also start your manipulation and your experimentation, but then it'll turn it back into a negative with the chemicals inside the film, which you can experiment with heat or cooling or exposing it to light early. And then you can, the image is reversed and back into a positive image, which is another step in that development process that you can experiment with. But it must also find the right time to completely stop the image and hold it, where you can also, in that process, experiment as well. So in my humble opinion, it is the best film to experiment with because there's no boundaries to what you can do with it. The immediacy of Polaroid developing process invites photographers, like I said, to manipulate and experiment with polarographs. Experimental techniques that I have personally worked with is obviously collaging itself, but also film soups, and it's something that you can do with things that you have in your house and things that you have in your immediate area, as well as microwaving and burning, like you see an example on your right. You can also mark and scratch, and that's what I was talking about in the early processing phases. You're able to manipulate those with pressure or heat, and marking your Polaroids is a really fun way to add like a multimedia approach to your artwork. But it's all about that timing and that process. There's also embroidery, and you can make transparencies as well as emulsion lifts, but also include that in a collage of some way. Okay. And then here are two examples of what you can do with Polaroids. These were shot, the first one was shot as is, and then I soaked the middle photo in for a week, and then the outside were put into a microwave. So you can experiment both in the camera, which my partner afterwards will discuss, and you can also experiment afterwards with different process. So pretty exciting film. But why instant film? I think that's a really important topic to discuss, especially in a modern world. I'm actually a digital photographer. It's what I do for a living. I'm a videographer and a drone pilot, and it still was not enough. There was just something missing from the process. I felt everything with digital, everything is so exact, and the image is either right or it's wrong. Where a Polaroid, you have so much room for experimentation, and it's never going to be exactly what you expect. There's so much room for color shifting with the heat. I'm sure if any of you have shot Polaroids here this week, they're warm, right? So there's different things that you can do there. The unpredictability of instant film invites photographers to experiment. Like again, like the process, but if it's all up in the unknown, it's inviting you to explore its boundaries. The instant gratification. I was telling a lot of people while I've been here, it's been kind of hard for me to interact with strangers. And until I hand them a Polaroid that I've actually taken of them, they haven't spoken to me. There was no smiles, and then I handed them the Polaroid, and it was a smile. It was the icebreaker. It was a tangible product that we could actually exchange, and the language barrier too, it helped. It didn't need language. It didn't need anything. Emotion was in that photograph. The instant film is romantic, it's poetic, it's soft, it's never exact, but when you're using instant film for art, I believe that that's a great medium to use, because you have a message or a story in your photographs, you're going to get more meaning and more emotion from even people looking at your art, but even from yourself. There's been so many times where I've metered all of my light and I'm ready for my shot, and then it comes out completely different colors, but suddenly that's how it should have been the whole time. And that's why I love instant film, because there's always happy accidents. You can't make mistakes. If you're looking for analog vibes and soft dreamy colors, or Polaroids are definitely something that you're going to want to try to experiment with versus Instax. Instax is more of like a documentary, bright, bold colors, less room for experimentations, more so than Polaroid. But if you're looking for contrast and sharpness, I would definitely say Instax is something that you would want to play around with. But for the sake of experimental photography, Polaroid's the way to go. And if you're looking to create raw, real, unedited images. In a modern world, it's been really hard to find something you're expected to over-edit and over-produce and do things quickly, and oh, it's okay if the model doesn't look right, you can just edit it in Photoshop later on. You have to slow down to shoot a Polaroid. You have to think about your process, think about color theory, and it helps take a deep breath. It's relaxing to shoot Polaroids. I personally choose instant film for many different reasons, but every photographer has a story or a message that they're going to want to tell through their medium. I chose instant film with a connection to chronic illness. I was looking for a medium and for something that could tell a message with an impact that I didn't have to use my words. And I was shooting digital at the time, even with fine art, and it didn't have that impact. And I started to stop talking out loud about spreading awareness for a controversial illness, and I started shooting collages. And it was almost instantly, and I think it's the romanticism. People relate to Polaroids. It has a sense of nostalgia. And so if you can make an art piece that is relatable to other people who feel unseen, and they can sit and hold your artwork in person, I found it to be very high impact. At the same time, I found, because of Polaroid's history, when Polaroid went bankrupt, and then, I shed many tears over that, and then we got picked up by Impossible Project, and now they're back to Polaroid. I felt like they were the underdog, and I connected with that, being the underdog. But it's also a way I felt seen by film, that it was just everything I was. It was unpredictable. It was, anything kind of went. I had control over something finally, but no control at the same time, if that makes sense. And I knew once everything lined up that Polaroid was going to be what I chose to deliver this message. And it's been a really great experience so far. Parallels between chronic illness and unpredictability of film, I found that it helped other people view their message, even if they didn't connect in the same way or the same message, anything. And I think if it was any other medium, it would not work. It would not work that way. Because of the tangible, in-person, nostalgic, romantic aspect. People can kind of see their own message in your artwork because of that unpredictability. And then here are two examples that I've shot for Lyme awareness. Both were shot up in Northern California. County. I've actually chose to remove the white borders on these. I just felt it was a little distracting. It was the first time I actually ever did that. And both were shot in 2 separate days. A lot of people think for collaging that they have to be big, and they don't. They have to be just, the smallest collage can be a diptych of 2 images. And in my opinion, they're a lot harder to create. You only have 2 frames to share your message or tell a story. Here's an example of a triptych that I took in the California poppies. I love sharing this because it's just in Barcelona. It was very hot. And these were I tried to get blue, and I put these in ice packs under like a pound of ice with ice packs on them, and they are still magenta. But I try here to experiment with the chemical process and how I could control the weather. The inspiration for my work comes from painters, ironically enough, is Salvador Dali and Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo, all of her work also was from her life and her struggle and her pain, but it also was able to bring people together, and it spoke loudly for her without words. And so I knew that I wanted to go a certain aspect with surrealism. And obviously, Salvador Dali, all of his surrealism is just really impressive. It works a lot with time and the message of how we waste it, how we utilize time, and that really stuck with me. Moving into the future of instant film is looking really good, and the best thing that we can do is continue to share and talk about it and say why we love to shoot with it and inspire each other. The popularity of instant film fuels art and innovation and experimentation from a new generation of photographers. And that's what's most important, because when you're shooting with a vintage medium, it's our job to pass that message on. Anytime I see a child with a Polaroid camera, I always applaud them. We'll buy them a pack of film because you got to keep that. That's how we keep instant film alive. But you get moving into the future, there are so many different things experimental wise that you can do with Polaroid that I want to encourage people to keep experimenting and keep finding new ways to experiment with film, because in no way have we even probably scratched the surface. There's so many different things that you can do, especially with film soups and soaking them. People use household cleaners, or like, I don't know if this will work, I'll soak it in here for a week, or so definitely try to take an approach of anything goes, sky's the limit, and just see what happens. It also, Polaroid helps bending the rules of tradition, especially modern tradition, where things need to be fast and edited. It's going to help us go back to a time where we accept natural imagery and we accept, say, women for their natural form instead of edited down. And I think that's really important process that Polaroid will be able to do for the whole world, honestly, if we can sit there and bring it back to a traditional, unedited, beautiful form. You can also push the envelope of creativity with collaging, experimental forms, in-camera experimentation, and finding new ways to inspire other photographers with Polaroid film. When shooting collages and Polaroids, you're going to have happy accidents. That's what I call them. There's never a bad accident. Since shooting instant film over the last 4 years, I have a lot of accidents. I shoot a lot of people, so I have a lot of arms, a lot of legs, a lot of heads. And once COVID hit, I was like, you know what, instead of going out and trying to shoot against the rules, I'm gonna go dive into my box and see what I have. I actually created this piece during COVID with simply mistakes that I was never gonna use, what frustrated me in that moment. And to this day, this is one of my highest paying prints, and they were mistakes. I was gonna throw them away. So instant film is something you keep forever. You keep them, even your mistakes, because one day you could make another piece out of them, or you can utilize them in some other way. I always joke to myself that my accidents know what needs to be created. I just don't know what it is yet, so I keep them in a box. I also like to, I experiment more outside of my camera with like surrealism, but I also use a lot of prisms and mirrors. So there's things that you can do with the film itself, but also inside your camera, instead of maybe experimenting with a film or with props. Like on the right hand side with the poppies, it is shot with mirrors. And you always don't have to line up. I always have my cloth on perfect squares, a little OCD about it. But I feel that with a collage and with instant film, when they don't line up, that it's almost like a vortex or like a window that you're seeing this surreal message. And moving into the future, I think I will definitely be trying to shoot more loose and fast, because I think it adds a And here's just another example of psychedelic landscapes. I'm sitting on a lot of new work right now for a solo show, so you'll definitely have to stay up to date. If you would like to get in contact and ask any questions about Polaroid film, I will be happy to answer them. I talk all day long about the beauty of Polaroids and help experiment. You guys can connect with me on Instagram at Film Collage Artist, or send a message to my website. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Ooh, good question. Actually, I brought it. Is it over here? Let me show you actually, 'cause it's my So in COVID, I wanted a Polaroid camera where I had more control. I wanted to be able to also get closer to my subjects. So I was shooting originally with like just a point and shoot original Polaroid. And the Instax wide 100 but I have them modified with actual lenses on them. And then in COVID was my time to experiment. So I actually shoot all my Polaroid film with a Mamiya Universal Press. I have adapted a Rosy Vote back onto the side, which allows me to shoot SX70 color I-type, 600 film. And then this is actually the Impossible Lab that is attached to the back. I don't have my arm on here it's like a shutter, but I actually, to get a right side up image, I shoot upside down. So you'll see me around like that. And people in my workshop, including him, he's shot with it. It's pretty exciting. But I mainly focus. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Your multi-exposure, actually non-collage with the three images. In order to create this series, let's say one frame, how many lots of frames did you use? Was it using lines and everything?
Yeah.
Like 3, 4, 5 lots immediately.
Yeah, no. It is not easy to line them up. It is not easy. And I should be more experimental and forgiving with it. I'm not. I'm OCD about it. So I do overshoot. My biggest Polaroid collage was 54 pieces. I think I had 12 mistakes. So I'll have about a pack of film. Usually that's a mistake that I'll reshoot, which isn't too bad. In the beginning, it was worse. Yeah, and then I'm getting better. Yeah. Yeah. Any other?
You're using Polaroid, I believe, right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So you're using Polaroid film, right? Compared to versus the Fuji film, you're using Polaroid.
Yeah, and I found that in COVID, I was shooting both up until COVID, and I just fell into Polaroid. It was comforting. I felt like it was understanding even in that situation. I feel like Fuji and Stax in that situation was just so exact and kind of in your face, where Polaroid was more of a hug, and that's what I needed. And I don't think I've shot even in Instax in the last year and a half. It's been my comfort. But it does have its perks. There are certain, I do have a collage that I'm going to travel out to that I knew instantly that I wanted to do Instax with it, which I was surprised.
Another question, that's a realistic image of the face with a candle. Do you create such stencils inside the camera, or do you cut out from some Polaroid? I've never tried it, so I have.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
How you created it.
Can I get back to it? Yeah. So I collage myself normally, and then the middle is like an entire Polaroid, and then I cut my face out, and then I burn the edges with a lighter. Yeah. It's bad luck though. Don't cut your own face out of a Polaroid. It's really bad luck. I had bad luck for like a week. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I think it's all you. Yeah, thank you.
there is no PowerPoint? Excuse me, no, there is no PowerPoint. I cannot open the...
This is the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, this is the presentation, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, wait.
Yeah, close it.
Mamma mia, no, you don't have it on
Presenta nella tablet? I don't know.
sì, no, let's literally
Ah, let's
well, let's see this. This is a little bit it's coming from the right, but I don't know. Okay, let's
Okay.
okay. Right. Let's put it below that. Okay.
Hello. Okay, my name is Felicita Russo, and I'm going to show you my work with Polaroids and light painting. First, I will introduce a little bit of myself, because I think what I did in the past years is important to understand why I do something in my Polaroid work. Then I will give you an introduction to light painting, because I realized that actually not everyone knows exactly what is considered to be light painting. I will tell you a little bit about how I started and why I still do it. I will show you some of my portfolios and also some cameraless work I did with the light painting in Polaroid. Okay, first of all, I am Italian, and I am born in Naples, and I studied astrophysics at the college, and I have a PhD in atmospheric physics. I studied at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and I had the honor to work at NASA for my PhD. And I work with optical systems, with light and optics. So I grew this interest in light since the beginning of my studies. The picture you see on the left with the green laser, that is the instrument that we used to measure the concentration of pollution in the atmosphere. So I learned this concept that light can be used to study what is outside. Not only is the way in which we know the universe, but we also can study the atmosphere using light. So photographically, I started as an astrophotographer when I was a teenager. So I also have an underlying passion for planets and stars and in the universe in general. So light painting as a definition means painting with light, and photographically speaking is to create, highlight the movement with lights. This at the beginning, the first time this was done not for artistic purposes, but for technical reasons. In fact, the first time that we see, the first pictures that we see in which there are lines of light that record a movement, they were done in 1914 by Frank and Lillian Moller. They studied the movement of their employees with these lights to explore their working position, to study the ergonomics of the working positions. Then the first one that tried to explore and study these principle is Man Ray, that started doing some what he called the space writings. And you can see that he was using a frame to get the reference in the space, because I don't know if you ever tried, it's very difficult to understand what you are doing, what you are drawing, because you cannot see what you are drawing, and so most of the times you need a reference. Then John Milley was studying the strobo flash, and he also was experimenting with the lights and movement, when he actually attached some lights to the shoes of a skater, and he photographed the long exposure to highlight the movement of the skater. Then he talked with his friend Picasso, and this is actually the passage that I see when the light painting started entering the art, the world of the art. Is when Picasso started doing with him, collaborating with him for these pictures in which he was actually painting with light. Then in the years, some other artists took this principle of trying to do something with the lights in their painting, in their photographies. I like very much the work of David Dilipe, because I find it very expressive, and I actually tried to do something like self-portraits like he did, and I discovered that it's actually much more difficult than it can look. So it's very interesting to me. There is now a growing international community of people that do light painting in digital. I started light digital, and there is actually a need when they organize a call for expositions or competitions. They always have to specify which kind of pictures are considered light painting and which one are not. In these 8 pictures, you see 8 different examples of picture that could be light painting, in which we have the movement highlighted by lights, but actually only 4 of them are considered by the international community as real light paintings. And the difference between the 4 that we crossed and the other ones is the intention of the photographer. If you see in the picture on the left, there is no intention. The photographer is just a passive observer of a movement in which he is not involved. While on the right, those lights are there because the photographer wanted them to be there. Which this is a very important distinction, I think. I started light painting like often we do, by looking at other people's work and then seeing something interesting and trying to do something similar. The first artist that I really loved and wanted to kind of emulate was Harold Ross. He creates both still life and landscape pictures in which he moves a light into the picture, illuminating from different directions, creating these kind of eerie atmospheres. So I really liked those, and I wanted to recreate them. So I studied him, and I discovered that actually what he does an overlap in Photoshop of different exposures. This is not actually what I was going to do, because also from the light painting community philosophy, you should get a single shot in which your lights are fine. Then you can maybe do some post-production, but not the composition of different images. So I started thinking, how can I get this kind of look without doing different exposures. And I actually built a prototype, a tool which is able to get me this kind of light that you see in this picture only in one shot. I was walking through the trees, and the trees get illuminated by me, but you cannot see me. So that is the way in which this tool works. And so I was able in this way to do one single shot without doing compositing. Then I started wondering what other limitations there are to pictures to be considered in competitions and expositions. They have to be in a single shot. They don't have to be over manipulated. And some people say that they have to be straight out of camera. Now, straight out of camera in digital to me is a little bit confusing, because you know that the image, it doesn't is processed by the camera anyway when you convert it in JPEG. So it doesn't look to me like straight out of camera with the digital is possible. The real straight out of camera to me was instant photography, because there the photographer only has control of what happens before shutting, pressing the shutter. Afterwards, you don't have any more control. Of course, you can do other things like post-production, but if you don't, you have an image at some point that is straight out of camera. So I said, okay, let's keep on studying and try to do something with an instant. So I built a little light that Harold Ross uses in his pictures. He actually shows in his website how to construct it. So I did it, and I tried to do some still lifes. Obviously, the camera that I used was not very proper for still life work, because it's too, it has only a wide angle, so it's not. But this was a nice start to me, because I liked the kind of light that I could produce. So this was something that was encouraging me to go on. Then I was I saw when I saw the first time Chris Bauer work. He does mosaics with little squares of the prints of digital light paintings. So in this picture, every little square is made of a single light painting done independently of one of the others. So the collage, I said, okay, there are Polaroids that are usually used for collages and mosaics, so why don't I try to do with Polaroids? Keeping in mind that at the end I would like to do some collaging with Polaroids. So this is one of my first pictures, because actually it's conceptually very, very easy. I have a silhouette that is not transparent, that is attached to a transparent panel. So like Man Ray, I was having this panel in the vertical and painting the panel with a fiber optic brush. So the only thing I had to do here was to create these orange and yellow streaks of light that are done with the fiber optic brush. At this point, while I was doing it, I was thinking, okay, I am painting because I have a brush, and my paint is not made of acrylic or oil, but is light. So this was very fascinating to me. And I said, okay, I want to go on, and I started complicating my sky at the point that I wanted to create like a Milky Way. So in order to do so, I would have attached some cotton on the vertical panel, and I realized that it was physically impossible to keep the cotton stuck to the panel. So I said, okay, let's move the panel in the horizontal, and see what happens. In the horizontal, I don't have to stick stuff. I just have to put them on the panel. So I took the first things that I had in my studio, and I put them on the panel, and then I illuminated them with different colors. And actually, this picture, this first one, was very fascinating to me because it has many more colors than the one that I was using. I was only using red, green, and blue, and then I got all this yellow because of the composition of the colors between the different colors. So in my mind, that I was always experimental, like in the lab, and was studying the light. This was very motivating and fascinating. So I went on and I started putting different shapes. As soon as I put the circles, something happened in me, because those were planets. That was a universe. I was creating something that I liked very, very much. So I realized at this point that I could tell stories. It's not just making nice pictures, but I could add more content to what I was doing. This series is called Exploring Negative Space because I was painting these circles by drawing only the border. So I was painting the absence of light, basically. And I found this drawing in which there is a face that is composed by circles. So the title of this picture at the end was "We Are Made of Stars." Then I was really literally exploring the universe, many ways, different ways in which I could paint the universe. And so when my pictures became a little bit more complicated, I realized that I needed to study more the strokes of the brush and the colors. So I decided to do this series, inspired by Kandinsky's study on colors and brushes. And so I started building different kinds of brushes to get different kinds of effects. But I think the important moment in my exploration was when there was a call for a selection of Polaroids that was called the Eye of the Polaroid. So I really wanted to push myself further, and I said, okay, what if I paint on the transparent panel the parts that I want to stay black? And since the window, I imagine the window not for looking from inside out, but for looking from outside in, like like Magritte, the false mirror. And actually, when I looked inside of me, I said, what is an important image in my life? I was lucky enough to be able to see the sun eclipse in 1999. And now I have a son, so I had this image in my head in which I was showing to my son what I saw during the eclipse. So this picture here was the first one that I created in this portfolio. And this actually is the image, is supposed to be the image that you see inside the iris. Then I started doing more landscape, more surreal landscapes. And this is actually a portfolio, my first portfolio that was exposed in an exhibition, ISO 600 portfolio. And you can see that I try to create all sorts of different astronomic events also. Or we have other kinds of lights like fireworks, and we have planets. By the way, this is the picture that I have here for the exposition. And then I started dig into works of painters to get inspired by painters. And actually these two are, one is from De Chirico, but this is just adapted in Bologna. These are the two towers and the Neptune statue in Bologna. And this is also Magritte, because I wanted to see if I was able to recreate something with my Polaroids, something that we already knew with my Polaroids. During lockdown, besides having more time to experiment and to build, I actually built a small diorama of this city in which we have these monsters. If you read what I wrote here is the explanation of the meaning of the of this series, Metropolis. I was imagining, during lockdown, I was almost happy to be closed in my house with my husband and my son, because I am one of those lucky person that has an happy house. I was thinking about all the people that instead don't have this fortune, and probably to get away from the monster that was outside, they were stuck in the house with monsters that are inside. So I wanted to express this, and I actually am very happy that I am able to now think about the story I want to say, and just do it with light painting. Another series that I did during COVID was actually, technically, I was exploring textures, different textures to apply to my light paintings, and I had to give the texture a meaning. So I imagined like people all stuck together, and there was probably at the beginning And then with time, they still stay together, stay too close, and they contaminate each other. And so if you think about the texture like a virus that is spreading, the virus is why I keep using Polaroids, because I really like it reacts to direct light. And this is my last different ways of creating silhouettes. These are done by putting a filter inside the camera, and in this filter I draw the silhouettes. So actually these pictures are not possible in digital unless you use Photoshop. So that was actually something that I thought at this point Polaroid is even better. And I think I am finished. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yeah, no questions. Ah, okay.
Are you continuing, like, are you working on these series? I see that you transition even more so than what we've talked about. What are you working on right now?
Okay, I have some other things that are pretty new, and I'm still in the thinking stage, so that's why I didn't show them, because I still have to work it out. But I'm working on the round frames, because I think that in Polaroid the frame has a strong meaning. It's not just a decoration. So the transition between the square frame and the circular frame for me was not trivial. So I am studying how to put the square in the back in the circle. Yeah.